Leading families to seek God's truth in everyday life, life. Leading families to seek God's truth in everyday life, life.
Centurion Life. Centurion Life.
All right, here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
First podcast.
Yes. First episode.
We're talking about one of the most humbled moments
Yeah.
in our marriage.
We're putting it all out there.
It is our biggest conflict that we have
Yeah.
had ever in our marriage.
In our relationship.
So-
Yeah.
Obviously, the reason that why we are naming this episode conflict.
Yep.
It's going to happen.
True.
So, just to put in preference of how the enemy works, just to let you, the audience, know,
Mm-hmm.
my wife and I
Yep.
have been in due diligence in doing this podcast. Everything's in place, everything is planned, everything was purchased, and we have actually recorded several podcasts
Successfully.
already. Okay, waiting in the background, ready to be
Mhm.
released at the appropriate
Yeah.
time. And God just put it up on my heart. No, Mario, you need to talk about conflict first. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a couple side, part 2, part 3, maybe, that we need to unpack a little bit. But the first one we had to do was conflict, and the biggest conflict that ever happened in our marriage.
Right.
And what happened
What happened?
when we started to do this podcast?
Well,
The first time we recorded
Yep.
conflict.
you and I did fantastic. However, something on the computer just totally deleted the whole episode. And so whenever you went to go edit it, you couldn't even find it.
Nope.
It was nowhere.
Frustrated.
It was like, oh, we have to do this again.
When every other episode recorded just fine,
Right.
fluidity,
Yeah.
stored, everything.
Right.
You click on that episode, and there's about 5 seconds. It shows in the timeline
Uh-huh.
there is 48 minutes. But when you actually click play, it goes, and that's
Love
it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, okay, enemy. We don't know what's going on. So,
Mhm.
all right. So we do number 2 podcast or re-recorded
Uh-huh.
conflict. It's going to happen. And then what took place again?
Then the computer stuff was fine.
Oh, yeah. It was fine.
But there was some hurt feelings and some things that maybe we just weren't ready in the moment to talk about. And we had to pray through some stuff.
Yeah.
But we're good now.
To put it in simple terms,
We're good.
we actually had conflict in the middle of the episode of recording conflict.
My God.
Yes. And I was like, what is going on here?
Yes.
I'm not
Yes.
being fully transparent. You're not being fully transparent. And we're just like,
Yeah.
and I knew it was just not going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
The blessing that we were supposed to be,
Mhm.
that was upon it left.
Yep,
Because
that's
we
true.
were not being truthful.
Yeah.
And we ended up in a little tiff.
Right.
I slapped the computer on the space bar, which stops the recording.
Uh-huh.
And I'm just like, what are we doing?
Right. And then
Whoa.
I was just like, delete it. We're just done.
So here we are.
Yep. Take 3.
Even though several episodes recorded, we have to do this one first.
Yes.
So here we go. Take 3. 3's a charm. Conflict is going to happen.
Yep.
So let's first start off with what good old Webster says about conflict. And it says, definition of conflict, a mental struggle resulting from incompatible or opposing needs, drives, and or wishes.
I love that. It says opposing needs
Yes.
because that's exactly what happened to us.
Yes,
is we had
Because
opposing
you
needs.
think when you get married,
Uh-huh.
oh, it's bliss.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
in love. everything's flowing and everything.
Mhm.
You got the honeymoon kick in, It was you might have
Yeah.
even had a wonderful dating,
Mhm.
wonderful engagement,
Mhm.
wonderful wedding day,
Yep.
and you're 6 months in and you still haven't had a speed bump or nothing.
Yep.
But trust me, as the title says, conflict. It's gonna happen.
And it happened. It does.
It's what so many people refer to as when the honeymoon
Mhm.
fades away. Honeymoon's over.
Right.
Now the real people come out within us.
Right.
Our guard is down. We knock down walls.
Mhm.
We feel more, what's the word?
Comfortable.
Yes,
Mhm.
comfortable. We feel that we can share and give everything that we're thinking and let it flow from our mouths. But
Yep.
that's not the case,
That's true.
okay? Because as I like to speak to all my clients, when you're in a biblical relationship, Christ-centered,
Mhm.
you don't get a choice on what it looks like, what it sounds like, or how it reacts.
Yeah.
God's very specific on how we are to react as husband and wife, how
Mhm.
are we supposed to treat each other, how we're
Yep.
supposed to speak to each other, how we're supposed to surrender to each other. So when we go astray from what God says we're supposed to do, this is when conflict
Mhm.
gets ugly.
That's
No,
true.
let me hear me when I say this. There is such a thing as healthy conflict.
Correct.
Because after all, I don't know about anybody else around here, but I don't want to be married to someone like myself. So by default, because of that, why do you laugh?
For the same reason, if I said, well, I don't want to be married to somebody like myself, you would laugh too. See, you're laughing.
I would be in constant physical conflict every day if I married somebody like myself.
Yeah.
We'd be going toe to toe.
Mm.
And what would you be doing on your side?
I would be like yelling at the other person, like, what are you
Mhm.
doing? Why are you this way?
Oh, yeah.
What's happening?
Or in those moments where you're very passive.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I would be mad
I'm
because
fine.
I
You're
hate
fine.
it.
Everything's fine.
I hate it within myself. So I know that if somebody were to do it to me, I would be like, ugh.
Yep, that indeed. So one of the things that I like to emphasize is that conflict does not always lead to damage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
That's true.
when you take control of the conflict biblically, okay, when you operate in your godly roles as God intended, okay, what healthy conflict can do is that it leads to growth,
Mm-hmm.
it leads to a deeper understanding,
Correct.
improved communication,
Yep.
and it makes you push to the progress, which is toward your goal.
Right.
Okay. Healthy conflict actually cultivates empathy. And that's where our biggest conflict to date,
Mm-hmm.
and God willing, will never happen again in
Yeah.
any form of conflict. We will always be surrendered to Jesus in Jesus' name.
Mm-hmm. We've learned our lesson.
Yes.
Got the teaching.
But,
We're done.
so here we are, we're about to share our biggest conflict
Mm-hmm.
moment we ever had.
Mhm.
And what I would like to say at this, let's see, Victor was how old at this time?
3 or 4.
Okay.
Closer to
So
4.
that means we're about 5 years in our
Yep.
marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And what took place between when we met each other to 5 years in is that we didn't address
Mm,
our childhood.
that's true.
And let me put it very plain.
Mm-hmm.
Your childhood affects your adulthood.
Yeah.
And if you don't have it in check, if you don't have it to where God has done a miraculous thing and healed you in those childish moments, or in your child moments, I should say, not childish, child moments where you
Right.
got hurt, you didn't have a choice, you went through something very traumatic, very painful.
Mhm.
If you don't allow God to help heal that portion of you to get closure, to get healing, trust me, it's going to rear its ugly head up at the most inopportune time
Mhm.
in your relationship.
Exactly. I mean, if you don't heal from your childhood wounds, then everything that your partner says, you're going to view it and you're going to hear it from a different perspective that
Yes.
maybe they're not even trying to communicate, but your wounding and your unhealed parts like filter that through your wounding. So that's
It's a
why it's
distorted view.
exactly. It's critical that you heal from your childhood stuff so that you can have a successful relationship with your spouse.
Right. So let's share a little bit about what
Mhm.
we gone through. So in my childhood,
Mhm.
I was physically abused by my father
Yeah.
from birth until 12 years old. That's all I knew.
Mhm.
I thought that's how fathers loved their family.
Yeah.
He had a drinking problem, and he had a very physically abusive problem.
Yeah.
And I was that kid that went to school with long sleeves, pants, every day to school,
Mhm.
even on summer days. Why? Because I had to hide my bruises. I had to hide the
Mm.
scars
Yeah.
that took place.
Mhm.
And the only time, and this was going through some counseling, is I ever remember when my father actually was in my life for those
Mhm.
first 12 years was when he wanted to live out his dreams through my
Mm.
experiences of sports. And
Yeah.
because I loved my father, I went and did everything he wanted me to do. And he was the head coach or an assistant coach in all of the sports. So I was the running back and I was the linebacker
Yeah.
in football. And in baseball, because I was left-handed, had a
Mhm.
very nasty curve, which was a beautiful thing,
Mhm.
and I was the pitcher.
Mhm.
Okay. When it became basketball, I was point guard. When it came to wrestling, I was on point because I actually let my frustration out on those people
Oh.
and the little boys.
Those poor boys.
Yeah. I mean, I probably put a headlock on a little bit too tight.
Mhm.
Probably tried to tear off his arm when I was just trying to turn him over.
Yeah.
Yeah, God forgive me for all those kids that I didn't mean to tear your limbs. But my father was there in those moments of my life, and that's it. But the unfortunate part about it is he never congratulated me.
Mhm.
He never hugged me.
Mm.
He never said good job.
Yeah.
He always met me with criticism.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is I would get the win.
Yeah.
I would make a touchdown. I would score the winning point. I would have a strikeout game. And when I walked up to him, he'd be like, all right, that was okay, but this is
Wow.
what we need to work on. Or, hey, this is what we need to improve. Hey, you could have
Mhm.
done this better. I want to point some things out to you.
Wow.
This is all he met me with. And it was hard because I see other
Yeah.
kids getting their affirmation, their
Yeah.
affection, high
Mm.
fives, hugs from their father.
Mhm.
And here I was, nothing. And so to that very point, this is what drove me.
Yeah.
Okay. No matter what you said in criticism, what could have wrecked me, and made me ball up, like a little fetus emotionally,
Mhm.
I took it and that's where I drew from my strength. Because then from that point forward, I was like, I'm going to prove you wrong.
Yeah.
No matter what you say. Oh, you don't think I can do it? I'm going to prove
Yeah.
you wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, you think that's too big of an obstacle? I'm going to prove you wrong.
Mhm.
And so that was my push. That was where I pulled from my pain.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So that's where I came from, that stance of that hurt child, and it manifested itself
Mhm.
into our marriage.
Yeah.
And every single time when you shut down, I got more angry,
Yeah.
I got more frustrated, and just like I took it out on those boys, you know, on the wrestling mat, so to speak,
Mhm.
I took it out on you.
Yeah.
And instead of
Emotionally.
communicating, yes, and
Mhm.
instead of communicating to you in a healthy way of, hey, I need your connection.
Yeah.
Hey, why aren't you talking to me?
Yeah.
Hey, this is a two-way street. We need to work together as a team.
Mhm.
Instead, I was in those moments of frustration. I was like, why aren't you talking to me? Say
Yeah.
something. And I was standing over you,
Mhm.
waving my hands in a
Mhm.
very aggressive stance. It's what you refer to as when I was becoming the Hulk.
Right.
Okay. And I knew in the back of my brain, I know it was scaring you. I know it made you shut down.
Mhm.
But the overwhelmingly uncontrolled,
Right.
never healed portion of me
Yes.
drove me to the point of that frustration and
Yeah.
anger.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to confess here. There were some times I was so ugly and let it loose, in such a reckless form. I stomped on our coffee table and broke it.
Yeah.
I had a plate in my hand and I threw it up against the
Mm.
wall as you were leaving the room. I didn't throw it at you, but nonetheless, I
Right.
still threw it.
Yeah.
And I was so frustrated that you had zero communication to me. And I just
Mhm.
couldn't figure out, why is my wife not talking to me?
Yeah.
So that was in that portion of the first couple years of our marriage,
Mhm.
but it developed pretty quick. I mean, it was a fast, slippery slope that we went down real quick.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, if you would,
Mhm.
unpack your side of
Mhm.
how you grew up
Mhm.
and why you had, I should say,
Mhm.
that shutdown mode.
Right. So, I grew up with a single mother, and she just had the weight of the world on her shoulders. My father wasn't in the picture. Um, uh, she just had a lot of stress on her growing up, or as we were growing up, as my sister and I were growing up, and you know, and like I remember them constantly arguing. There was a lot of yelling in my house because my mom was trying to get us out the door, get us to soccer practice on time, get us to dance practice on time, get people going so that she could go to work, so that she could make money, so that she could pay the mortgage because it was all on her, right? And so there was just a lot of yelling in the house, and yelling is a huge trigger of mine. And so
Which I didn't know at the
yeah,
time.
and honestly, if you would have asked me, I would have not been able to pinpoint what was the trigger for me at that time. Um, so there was a lot of yelling growing up. That was a huge trigger for me. And then, men were kind of like um fantasized about a little bit. Like there was always this constant like theme of like, oh, I'm waiting for my Prince Charming, or oh, he's gonna treat me like
So for
Prince
preference,
Charming.
what you mean is your mom didn't remarry ever
Oh no,
while you were in the house.
no,
Okay.
no. It was just my mom, my sister, and I
Okay.
grew up. And another thing is that really I think hindered our relationship is I had never really been around a man. I didn't understand how men communicate and how men react and how men can sometimes be um uh if women, whenever we're hurt, we cry, and if men are hurt, sometimes they
We
can be
yell.
angry.
Yes.
They can be angry, and I didn't understand that was the same emotion. And
Mhm.
so I had never been around a man before. I had independent woman like mentality. I don't need no man. Kind of was the theme
Right.
of my childhood.
Even though it wasn't spoken, but it
Right.
was presented
It
that
was
way.
it was a strange mix of like I don't need no man, but also like I want a man to come and alleviate some of this pressure that I feel.
Right.
You know, so I had a lot of really conflicting views on men and relationships with men
Right.
growing up. And so I didn't know how to be married
Right. So
in the beginning at all.
kind of unpack that other portion of that learned process because of the chaoticness sometimes that was
Mhm.
in the family.
Mhm.
Um, what did that turn you into
Mhm.
in order to create peace?
Yeah. So I'm glad that you brought that up. So and I learned very early on to ask myself this question: how do I make this person stop being angry or stop yelling? And growing up, my mom, her trigger was mess. So
Physical mess.
yes, like
Mhm.
messy house or whatever.
Mhm.
So if I cleaned, then the chances of her coming home and yelling were a lot lower.
Right.
So that really fed like my people pleasing, like let me do it for you,
Mhm.
thing in me.
Right.
And I think it's really interesting. So there are 4 or possibly 5 types of trauma responses, which is fight, flight, freeze, and now they've added fawn,
Mhm.
which is let me do that for you.
Right.
Let me do that. No, that's not too much. I can do it.
Right.
And that was definitely how I managed to keep a level of peace
Mhm.
in the house. Um,
Because there were times that you even did things that wasn't
For-
even your responsibility, right?
Sure. Yeah. So for context, my sister just had a lot of ADHD things going on. She had a lot of sensory issues going on. Honestly, so did my mom. And so
Just unaware of it.
right, and
Mhm.
they were undiagnosed, and so there was just a bunch of like things that were affecting one another, and it was just creating chaos. Like my sister, her thing was this was a common fight that I or not fight but conflict that I heard growing up. Like my sister really had an issue with tags touching her, um and so it made getting ready for school like an absolute nightmare, because like even though we would cut all the tags out of her clothes, like she would still be like, this feels uncomfortable, I can't wear this. And then she would spend like 35 minutes in the morning trying to find something to wear, and my mom would just be losing it because she could understand, like, just pick an outfit and let's go. um
Okay.
so there was just a lot there, and then my sister couldn't really clean her room very often for circumstances that
Well, we have that same issue with Victor, our son.
well, like, yeah, she just wouldn't clean her room, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I know that if mom comes home right now and sees this room not clean, we're gonna get yelled at. Or maybe I'm not necessarily gonna get yelled at, but I don't want to hear any yelling,
Right.
so I'm just gonna go and clean it for her.
Really? You cleaned her room
Yes, I did.
on more than one occasion?
Multiple times.
Okay. Let me ask this question.
Uh-huh.
How many times did you do her chores for her?
Oh, I couldn't count. I couldn't
Right.
a lot.
So again, this is leading up to being what people refer to as a yes person.
Oh yeah.
Just agree, just keep the
Yes.
peace.
Yes.
Yep. I don't want to have any conflict.
Yep.
That's fine. Okay, let's go. Let's move forward. So
Mhm.
yeah. So I see now,
Mhm.
now looking back and us going through counseling ourselves,
Mhm.
For this very issue that we're
Yeah.
about to reveal, how that affected you. And because it was not healed,
Mhm.
not dealt with,
Mhm.
I see now how it reared its ugly head in our marriage.
Yeah.
And even though, you know, uh, for all of our marriage, we were going to church.
Mhm.
I was a man of God, sold out completely,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I had this underlying issue on my side of uncontrollable frustration
Mhm.
and anger
Mhm.
that did not communicate to you
Yeah.
at all. It was the worst thing, unbeknownst to me, that this is how. How do I want to say this? It's not how your mom did it exactly,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, I brought the chaos that actually
Mhm.
triggered you.
Oh yeah. And I had no idea at the time that my silence would be like a death sentence for you.
Yes.
Like I didn't realize cuz in my mind I thought silence is better than yelling.
Hmm.
So I'm not going to yell at him. I'm just going to completely shut down.
Yeah. So let's speed this up.
Mhm.
So we have a couple of years like this.
Yep.
Where it just keeps building and building and building. You're shut down.
Yep.
Gets more and more and more. I become more frustrated.
Yeah.
I continue to escalate in my loudness,
Yes.
in my waving of my hands, in a very aggressive state.
Mhm.
I'm even domineering while you're sitting on the couch. I'm standing up, looking at you. It's just getting really ugly
Mhm.
between us as far as a marriage. And unbeknownst to me, your fear
Mhm.
that the enemy was, conjuring in this whole
Yep.
thing. He was orchestrating it from the get-go. He was affecting you through your childhood.
Yep.
He affected me through my childhood, and now he's like mixing this perfect recipe
Yep.
for disaster
It was the perfect
between
storm.
us. Yes.
Yeah.
And here we are,
Mm-hmm.
Friday morning.
Mm-hmm.
It's like any other day to me. And we had one car. I
Mm-hmm.
was working at a dealership in parts,
Yeah.
and you were just taking me to work as normal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I get out of the car, you smiling at me. I love you. I love you too. All right, sweetie. I'll see you later.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I'll see you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget, I get off at 6. All right. And boom,
Yeah.
I went to work.
Yeah.
What happened on your side?
So I want to kind of explain a few things here. So, um, I was inwardly very scared, very, very scared at this point because of the aggression level had escalated so high. But because the level had escalated so high, I was also in full-fledged fauna, or not fauna. I'm not a deer. Fawn mode. And so it was like I was doing everything a quote unquote good wife would do in the hopes that it would de-escalate him, because that's what I knew to do. That's what my trauma told me to do.
Right.
And so he did not know that I had made plans to leave that day.
I was clueless.
Yeah, because I put on a good show
Mm-hmm.
of being a good wife,
Yep.
unfortunately. And I made a very poor choice based out of my own trauma and fear to take Victor and to go stay elsewhere without him knowing.
Right. So let me pick up here on
Mm-hmm.
this side of it. So, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
let you get to your portion.
Yeah.
So Brittany drops me off. I work all day, and 6 o'clock comes around, and I go outside, and there's no one there. I don't think nothing of it.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking, okay, maybe she ran into traffic, whatever. So I'm waiting. 6:15 runs around,
Mm-hmm.
nothing. So I send a simple text, hey, where you at?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
I wait until 6:30. I'm getting a little worried. I text and I call.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
6:45. I'm texting, calling consistently. Still nothing. 7 o'clock rolls around. I'm frantic. So at this point, I'm calling police stations. I'm calling hospitals just to see if anything has happened to you or
Mm-hmm.
Victor.
Yeah.
And nothing.
Yeah.
All major hospitals, police departments, suburb police departments, all said nope. There is nothing, no accident information with that car license
Mm-hmm.
plate,
Mm-hmm.
with your wife's name, with your son's name, nothing. So, in a very hurtful, scared, frantic, emotional state, I
Mm-hmm.
started just walking home. And about halfway through, I'm like, well, I guess I could call some people. So I didn't know who else to call. So I called my pastor,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, okay, I'll come get you. And so within this 15-mile walk I started to do and walking home, he picked me up somewhere around mile marker 10,
Mm.
and he picked me up and he took me the rest of the way home,
Yeah.
and he prayed for me, and he says, just stay here. I don't know what's going on, Mario,
Yeah.
and he said that, but I'm with you. Call me if you need anything. I'll be checking in on you, and we'll be calling and see what's trying to make. He's going to do his portion of trying to reach out to you and see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, I call my accountability partner, and he says, listen, at this point, it's probably 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
He comes over. I see his wife in the other car. So he drove his car and her car. I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And he says, listen, I don't know what's going on. He says, but we are fixing to head out of town with the family function. Is something I can't, stop. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want you to. I said, but, keep me in your prayers. He goes, yes. He hands me his keys to his truck,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, I'm going to ask you to do something that you're going to struggle with. And he
Mm.
goes, I know you're a man of God.
Yeah.
He says, man, you did amazing things in my life, how you led me and mentored me. He goes, so this is my portion of helping you.
Mhm.
He goes, promise me you're not going to take these keys and take my truck and drive all across God's green earth and try and find your wife. Stay at home
Mhm.
and do what you've been teaching everyone this whole portion of your Christian walk.
Wow.
Take it to the cross.
Yeah.
Get on your knees.
Mm.
And in that moment, it really hit me because that's what I have been doing. At that point in time, I was 5 years in mentoring men,
Mhm.
you know, and preaching and confessing and leading in every way possible on showing them how to react, showing them what a man of God does in crucial times.
Mhm.
And here I was in my crucial point. What am I going to do?
Mhm.
And he reminded me, get on your knees, take it to the cross.
Yeah.
So I promised him, no, I'm not going to take your truck and I'm not going to drive around and try and find my wife.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I did right by that.
Yeah, you did.
It was one of the hardest things I ever did because every bit of my
Mhm.
flesh wanted me to find you and see what's going on.
Mhm.
I wanted to drive to every friend's house, every
Mhm.
known place you've ever gone, even every associate, every ex-worker. I mean, anybody I can think of. I was ready to drive all across Tulsa metro area and try and find you, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So he left. I went in the house and I bawled my eyes out. I laid face down on the ground, bawling with snot, boogers,
Mhm.
tears. And I put on some worship music. And this very first song came on is called Thy Will
That.
Be Done
Mhm.
by,
Francesca Bettistelli, I think.
I don't, doesn't sound familiar, but okay. I thought it was like her name, Kobe or something like that, whatever.
I'm not sure. It doesn't play on the radio
Right.
anymore, so I have
Anyway,
no idea.
it was that song, Thy Will Be Done,
Right.
And that meant that song hit me at the right
Mhm.
time in the right moment.
Yeah.
Thy will be done. Just don't feel good right now is one of the main phrases in that song. You know,
Yeah.
but it says Thy will be done, and I put that thing over and over on repeat and just cried my eyes out for a good 3 hours. I don't know where my wife's at, Father.
Mhm.
Hope you have her. Hope you have my son. And
Yeah.
I cried and cried and cried, and it was somewhere around 12:30, almost 1 o'clock in the morning. I get a phone call, and it's coming from, at that time, your best friend's husband.
Yeah.
And all he says to me was, Mario, I was told to inform you that your wife and your son is safe.
Mhm.
And of course, being to be my friend, okay, well, what's going on? I have no idea what's going on. Where is
Right.
she? What's going on? I have no clue.
Mhm.
You know, I know when I came home and I walked inside, I can see that you were kind of in a frantic state. You didn't take all of Victor's clothes. You didn't take your clothes, but I see you went through it real quick and there's clothes on the ground in the closet. You left dresser drawers open.
Mhm.
You just kind of snatch and grabbed, it looked like.
Yeah.
And I'm asking this man, who was also a man of God. I'm just like, brother, I'm doing everything I can just to keep it together and not to become ungodly. Please help me out. What is going on?
Mhm.
Where's my wife?
Mhm.
You are the husband to the best friend of my wife, and you don't know what's going on? And he says, I do not.
Yeah.
And that really hurt because in my deepest of hearts, I knew he knew.
Mm.
How can you not know when you're the best friend, that you're the husband's best friend? But anyway, I love him.
Mhm.
We have a wonderful relationship to this day. But in that moment, it just hurt because I was so lost as to why this was taking place. So
Yeah.
I'll let you take it from here
Mhm.
on where you went
Yeah.
and what happened.
So as soon as I dropped him off from work, um, I went home, packed some things, and I was very fearful that entire day. And looking back, I had um I guess created like this narrative around you that you were not the good guy, that you were not safe, or at least that's what the enemy was telling me
Right.
at that time, is that he's not a good guy and you are not safe. And everything in me was, I remember going home and shaking, putting all of the clothes, thinking that you were going to come, that you knew somehow, and that I was going to get found out.
Hmm.
And so I packed really quick and then filled up the car with gas and I left. And I went to a friend's mom's house all the way in like the Oklahoma City area in our car. And just, you know, she lived way out in the country. I was there. It took about 2.5 hours to get there. And then the car ride was, you know, nothing. It was kind of, I remember Victor being excited about it. And then we get there and get just out of the car and we decide to decompress for a little bit out in the yard. And
Well, this was the next day. I thought that.
no, it was literally, I got there and then 30 minutes later.
Okay.
Okay, so we get there, we decide to decompress a little bit. Victor's been in the car for over 2 hours. So I'm like, yeah, go run around in the yard because they lived way out in the country. And there's a hammock out there, and I decide to, ironically, get my Bible and read my Bible on the hammock. Because, and that just goes to show that I did not realize that the enemy was working on, I mean, I was putty in his hands at this point. Like, you know, he was like, he's not safe. And I was like, oh my God, he's not safe. You know, I was just believing, you know, everything that he was feeding me at this time.
Right.
But I was still trying to honor God at the same time by reading my Bible. That just goes to show the amount of grace
Yes.
and mercy
That indeed.
that God had for us,
Yeah.
especially me at
Even
that time
in the
frame.
middle of a mistake,
Yes,
God still talks to us.
right. And so I go to sit down on the hammock and I hear this commotion where Victor is at. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to go check on him. And then I hear screaming, like from Victor crying. And I go over and he's screaming, crying on the floor,
How old was
on the
Victor again?
ground.
He's a toddler, right?
Around 4.
Okay.
Like I think he like had just turned 4.
Okay.
Well, his birthday's in April and then this happened in September. So he's like newly 4.
Yeah.
And
Cute little toddler.
yeah, he was adorable. And he's screaming, crying, and he's got his hand covering his face or
the
his cheek.
Yeah, his side of his face. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, baby, what's going on? What's happening? What's happening? And he's just screaming, crying. And at this point, like, Victor was very articulate early on. He could always talk. But, like, he was not talking. He was just screaming. And I knew right there that something was wrong. And so I pulled his hand away from his face, and I just saw blood. And I was like, oh, my gosh, what happened?
Not just a little blood.
No, like a lot.
It was gushing
It
out.
was substantial.
Yes.
And so I go into the house to try to find my friend's mom to tell her, like, actually, I didn't really know what to do because I was in full panic mode.
So how did he get the gash?
Oh, they had a dog. They had a lab, and he had gone behind the dog and tried to pet him from behind.
Mm-hmm.
And the dog was not used to children. And so the dog got scared, turned around, bit Victor. In that process, Victor fell off the porch because he also has like a very minor scar on his eyebrow and
Mhm.
like by his lip a little bit
Mhm.
from the tumble that he took off the porch. And and so that's how he got bit. So
So you're in the house.
uh-huh. So I'm in the house, I'm in their bathroom, and unfortunately, this lady has a full-blown paranoia to blood.
Oh boy.
Like not fear, like a clinical like paranoia to blood. And I knew that. And so this was just like looking back, you can just see like the enemy just really doing the most, you
Mhm.
know? He was playing off of my fears, he was playing off of her deepest fear. It was really it was a hot mess. And so I am mere mere milliseconds from having a panic attack at this point. And I cannot speak. I am about to go into full shutdown mode. I cannot function at this time. And I just look at her, and I guess I shot like panic from my eyeballs, and she understood that I was in full panic mode. And she's a woman of God. She just starts praying in the midst of her fear. She starts praying, and as
Wow.
soon as she starts praying, I feel that feeling of I'm about to have a panic attack go away. And then I can function for my son and help him calm down and help him get the help that he needs, get him to the doctor, to the emergency room, and you know, where I can now function
Right.
basically.
So you get to the emergency room.
Uh-huh.
Long story short,
Yeah.
how many stitches? It was 13, right?
12.
12 stitches.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And not that I wasn't there because I had no clue at this point in time,
Mm-hmm.
but for reference, the doctor was very clear in telling you this is going to scar,
Oh, it was comical.
and there's a
Mm-hmm.
good chance that when he grows older, he's not going to grow any hair, if he has a beard.
It was comical. So the nurse comes in, and she's terrified to tell me this. She's like, "Ma'am, I just want to let you know that this will leave a scar." And I was like, I looked at her straight in her face and I said, "I do not care. I want you to sew my child up. He is bleeding." And she was like, "Okay, I'm glad you have that philosophy because some people have a really big problem with having a scar." And I was like, "I just need you to do what you do to get my baby sewn back up."
Right. So I'm curious,
Mhm.
how close were you to calling me to let me know what happened?
So honestly, this actually made me not want to call you because I knew that if anything were to happen to Victor, you were gonna, it was not gonna be good.
Right.
And
Because at this time,
yeah,
I still had not I still had not had
mhm,
my encounter with God
right,
to start
yeah,
changing me internally
yeah,
and make me reflect by looking in the mirror and saying, okay, what is wrong on my side?
right. Like I didn't want to call you, but as Victor's father, I knew that I needed to, and so I was very conflicted. So I took it to prayer. Ironically, like throughout all of this, I was still like giving God like a little bit of it, even though the enemy had like both hands in the cookie jar,
Right.
so to speak. There, God was still like using it because I mean, in Romans 8, it says um that He works all things for our good,
Right.
and what the enemy meant for good, the Lord or what the enemy meant for bad, the Lord turns around for good.
Yes, he does.
And that's exactly what was happening in this moment. And so I took it to prayer, and the Lord very clearly said, "Not yet."
Yeah. because I wasn't ready, and
Mhm.
I would have met you in that continuation of letting the Hulk out in a
Yeah.
very bad way.
Mhm.
I probably would have said, something of, where are you?
Yeah.
And screamed and hollered and until I got my way or till you hung up the phone. So
Mhm.
now I can look back at it and like, I'm glad you didn't call me.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
And it was shocking that I heard that from the Lord, because I
Hmm.
thought the Lord was going to be like, yeah, you need to call him, you need to
Right.
let him know.
No,
But
he needed to work on his son.
he clearly, said not yet.
Okay. So now we're in day 2.
Mhm.
Overnight, I'll let you know, I did not sleep at all. I might have slept maybe 2.5, 3 hours, knowing that I had to work on that Saturday,
Mhm. Mhm.
but it was a short shift. Um, and then, so I went to work, drug through it,
Mhm.
went home, I remember very vividly looking in the mirror and just going, okay, what do I not know, God?
Wow.
Reveal to me. I said, because there's only one way in my wife, in my opinion right now, in which she's going to come back for whatever reason. I
Mhm.
still don't know why she left.
Yeah.
Please reveal to me my portion. And that was a very hard prayer to say, looking in the mirror and
Yeah.
going,
That's crazy.
putting everything aside that what you did,
Yeah.
at least the known parts. So, you ransacked the house
Yeah.
frantically.
Mhm.
It looked like you left quick, fast, in a hurry.
Mhm.
You have my son,
Mhm.
and I have no idea where you're at, and you abandoned me at my work. So I was all sorts of butthurt about the whole situation, not knowing the why.
Yeah.
I put that aside because I had to kill my flesh,
Yeah.
and I got to work. And one of the first things that God said to me, you have no empathy.
Wow.
And that hurt
Mhm.
because, of course, like I put myself in her shoes. I know her portion. I know what she's going. No, I didn't.
Mhm.
And that's because of the Hulk coming out. I didn't know, one, it was triggering you from your childhood.
Mhm.
And number two, that's actually how I'm not supposed to treat you according to God's word.
Yeah.
I am not, according to God's word, I am not to be harsh to my wife.
Mhm.
You know, I'm supposed to love you as I love myself. Why would I want to have anyone yell, scream, holler in an authoritative, domineering way over me, just trying to communicate to me?
Yeah.
I myself would not want that. But here I was doing it to you.
Mhm.
So I was not listening or abiding by the law of what God told me to be as a man of God.
Mhm.
So the next thing I did was, okay, God. And at this point, I'm like, show me.
Wow.
Show me what I need to learn.
Mhm.
And I flipped on the YouTube and I'm just sitting there. What do I need to learn? What do I need to learn? What do I need to learn?
Mhm.
And the first thing that popped in my brain was vulnerability. And again, I'm scoffing at God in a little bit. What do you mean? I know how to be vulnerable. I share my most inner feelings with her. I let her know how I'm feeling. She knows about my childhood. But
Mhm.
what do you mean, be vulnerable? You know? And it's like there's another side to communication in which you don't have to yell, scream, hoot, and holler like a Hulk, but
Mhm.
instead sit down and express your feelings. Because prior to that, I was like, you know, you're not talking to me. Why don't you say something?
Mhm.
When in reality was, if I just would have sat down and be like, sweetie, I just want to let you know I'm feeling really isolated right now in this moment
Yeah.
within our marriage. I don't feel as one with you.
Mhm.
I feel like we're on opposite teams. And it's hurting me within my heart and my spirit that we're not as one. How much more would you have received that if I would have
Yeah.
said it that way?
Well, it makes me want to open up to you right now.
Yeah.
So,
So I'm like, okay, God, empathy, vulnerability, empathy, vulnerability. All right. So I type in vulnerability.
Mhm.
And the first thing that pops up was, what's her name? I always forget.
Brene Brown.
Thank you. She had this little series on a
Mhm.
TED Talk, I believe,
Yep.
about vulnerability. And let me just say, I watched that thing over and over and over because it just blew my mind,
Wow.
on what vulnerability is.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing that I took away, and I even say it to this day, is simply this, what she said.
Mm-hmm.
Vulnerability leads to connectivity.
Right.
And I wasn't connecting with you.
Mm-hmm.
I was connecting to you how I wanted to connect with you. Meet me with my aggression, please. So at least I know you're fighting with me or fighting
Wow.
for something rather
Yeah.
than nothing.
Yeah.
And because you shut down,
Mm-hmm.
I was going to prove to you, I'm going to get it out of you.
Mm.
I'm going to pull it out of you. Come on, you're going to fight with me or fight me, period.
Yeah.
One of the two is going to happen. And you didn't.
Yeah.
And so understanding vulnerability is actually sitting down and actually communicating to you the way you best receive.
Mm-hmm.
How I naturally talk is not necessarily how you receive communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so within that, I started diving deep in vulnerability. I started looking at scripture. How is a husband supposed to react? How is a husband supposed to treat his wife? How is and all these things, started popping up. Don't be harsh to her. Your body's not your own. Submit to your wife.
Mm-hmm.
Please your wife. What's the definition of love? Love is patient. Love is kind. The infamous Bible verse in Corinthians.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to unpack this on every level. So here I was all day long, all evening long. I go to church. I serve within my church in the sound booth. I come home and I'm still digging deep in God's word. I am going overtime because I want this thing fixed. For far too long, it was a wake-up call. It was a reckoning. It was me looking in the mirror at myself for the first time and acknowledging the faults on my side alone, period.
Yeah. Wow.
And God did a wonderful thing in me over those 3 days.
Yeah.
So we fast forward
Mm-hmm.
to the day of. What's this looking like for you? We're on day 3.
Mm-hmm.
God is working a great thing within my heart.
Yeah.
And I want you to unpack on your side
Mm-hmm.
what led up to a phone call.
Yeah. So I went into this thinking I didn't really have a solid plan, but I knew I just had this understanding that, okay, at least I know what to do as a single mom. So, like, I was like, okay, at least I know what to do as a single mom. So if this doesn't work out, I have
You have plan B.
I have plan B. Yes, exactly. But day 3, I just remember being very uncomfortable. And I just remember chalking that up to like, well, this isn't my house. So that's why I feel uncomfortable. But looking back, it was the Holy Spirit like stirring me and making me uncomfortable. Because the whole time I was thinking, I'm fine. This is fine.
Everything's fine.
This is completely normal. This every day wives leave their husbands. It's
Yeah.
not a big deal.
Yeah. The infamous lie the enemy was doing to you.
Yeah, another spoon-fed lie. And so I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. And then that night,
So conviction was taking place on your
yes,
side,
yes, it was.
but you didn't know at the moment.
Right, right. And so that night, so because of what happened at the country house with Victor needing 12 stitches and needing medical attention,
Oh, that's right. You had to
it
leave.
was
You
too
left.
much for the mom.
Yeah.
And so I went and I stayed at my friend's house.
Another friend.
In Arkansas. That's where they were living at
Well,
the
you're
time.
doing some driving.
I drove a lot. That poor car.
Isn't it amazing how the enemy makes you drive all the way around except for the place you actually need to be?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Can't
Sorry.
hide from your problems. That's what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
I was trying to run away from my problems.
All right. Continue, please.
So, I'm in Arkansas and we had just got there that day. Victor's having a blast because this is like his buddy's house.
Yep. Known friends.
Yeah. So Victor at this time, aside from having the dog bite, is like relatively unscathed by this whole event because he just thinks that we're going on like a vacation.
Yes.
And unfortunately. and and so I am the one really going through it, and I'm just being convicted little by little by little. And that night I put him to bed early because the family had gone out to an event, and
Uh-oh. So
I
you're
was alone
so you're by yourself.
with God.
Mm.
And
Here we go.
yeah. And so I remember being hungry, and she was like, make whatever you want in the kitchen. And so I'm just trying to make myself something to eat. And I am starting to get highly emotional making this pasta. And I'm like, I feel feelings of missing you. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to miss him. And try to push it down because I'm like, I'm fine. I don't need him. Ugh. And because it was God,
Mm-hmm.
I just remember being like on the floors crying and being like, I think that I miss my husband. And I call my friend because I really needed somebody to talk this out with me.
Right.
And she goes, Brittany, it's okay if you miss your husband. And I was
Mm.
like, oh my God, I do miss him. Oh my God, what am I doing? Oh my God, I love him. What am I doing? It was like this moment of like sobriety. And it was like the love that I had for you like returned. And I was like, we haven't always been like this.
No, we have not.
So the love that I remembered whenever we were dating came back, and I was like, oh my God, I love him. I need to call him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to wait for them to come back from their event to call you because I think my phone wasn't working in Arkansas, or maybe it had blocked you or something. I don't know.
Your phone worked because your name came across.
Oh, did I call you from my phone?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And so it was like 11:30 at night.
Yeah, it was late.
And I decided to FaceTime you.
Yeah. So allow me.
Mm-hmm.
So here I am. Had a hard 3 days with God. Revelation, receiving everything. I'm doing everything I need to be doing on my end. I killed my flesh from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
I never went and looked for you. For lack of better terms, I'm doing everything that I should be doing as a man of God. I hunkered down,
Mm-hmm.
got on my knees, I cried it out, I gave it all.
Yeah.
And asked God, okay, show me.
Mm-hmm.
3.5 days, he's exposing, he's revealing, he's telling me what I need to add, he's telling me what I need to take away,
Yeah.
he's telling me what I need to kill.
Wow.
And so here I am, and I thank God that I had my accountability partner calling me, and I thank God for my pastor
Mm-hmm.
for calling me. That both between the two of them, there was not any point in time in this 3.5 days where I was not getting checked in on, probably every 3 hours.
Wow.
Okay, this is how much love that God was showing me.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I am, 11:30 at night. I'm watching something on the television. It has to do with vulnerability. I'm just still digging in.
Mm-hmm.
And my phone rings, but it's face down.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, correction. It didn't ring. It was just vibrating because I had on vibrate. But I can hear it, and I was like, I really don't want to talk to anybody, whether that's pastor or whether
Yeah.
that's my bro. I just don't want to talk. And then God, in the back of my mind, very quickly was like, answer your phone.
Mm.
I was like, but God, I already had a check-in. I'm good. You're
Mhm.
working on me. I love you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to hunker down on this last little sermon part here.
Mm-hmm.
Answer your phone. So I go, okay.
Yeah.
So I pick up my phone and I look at it. Not only did you not call me, but you're FaceTiming me.
Yeah.
And because of the phone that we have, it
Uh-huh.
shows the face
Mhm.
of who's calling you when it's FaceTime. And I
Mhm.
saw your face.
Mhm.
And my first thought was, there's no way. And I threw my phone and it landed on the far side of the couch.
Oh no.
And I'm
Uh-huh.
like, no, she's really not calling me. No, it's not really her. Is it God? God, is it her? Is it her? And God's very clearly, answer your phone. And it's going quicker and quicker. Answer your phone. Answer your phone. Mario, answer your phone.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, oh. So I reached over and I grabbed it and I swiped and I caught it just in time,
Yeah.
and I was like, hi, sweetie. And I start crying.
Mhm.
You start crying.
Yep.
And I can't remember who spoke first.
Um so I think from what I remember happening is you didn't even get out high. You just started crying.
Yes.
And then I started crying. And then
Hmm.
I started talking.
And what'd you say?
Um, I think I said hi.
Yeah.
And then you started to profess your love to me.
Yes. And I remember because I wanted to make sure I got it out
Mm-hmm.
of what God did in my life,
Yeah.
regardless of what was the outcome of this whole situation. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to let you know what God did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, before you get off, please don't hang up. I just want to let you know I
Mm-hmm.
love you. You mean the world to me.
Yeah.
And through this whole process of 3.5 days, God has been working within me,
Uh-huh.
through me, killing my flesh, killing the Hulk,
Yeah.
telling me to be I had no empathy for you, showing me what it's like to be vulnerable with
Mm-hmm.
you, and how I could need to communicate on your level, how you best receive, to start seeing things in your perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and more importantly, just calming down and talking to you,
Yeah.
telling you how I feel
Mm-hmm.
instead of "Raw." It's like,
Yeah.
this hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember getting it all out. And in that process of
Uh-huh.
me, at that very last bit of getting it all out,
Mm-hmm.
while I'm talking to you, I just see you crying more and more
Yeah.
and more, and just tears are flowing at this point.
Yep.
And when I got done saying what I said, what did you say? I remember what you said.
The only thing that I remember from this conversation, I have no idea what I said.
It's
I
like
just
it's a big emotional blur,
It
right?
is it is erased from my memory. I have no idea where it went. But I remember you professing your love to me.
Mm-hmm.
I remember you crying. I remember it was like you were talking like you were never going to talk to me again
Yes.
because you really didn't know if
I had no idea at that point still.
if you were going to come, if I was going to come back.
Yeah.
Or anything. So you were like, okay, I love you. This is why I love you. This is what I've been doing. This is what I've been learning. And I'm sorry for this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
And
It was the
yeah.
confession that got you.
It was. It was. And honestly, it was everything that I needed to hear
Mm-hmm.
come from your mouth that I needed to hear, in the time before that, but it was happening now. And so, I just remembered all of the reasons why I love you. And I remembered my love for you, and you were professing your love for me and that you love me. And so, I just remember being like, I'm going to come home.
Yes.
I want to come home or
At the
something
end of the
like that.
conversation, you said, "Okay,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to come home."
Yeah.
And so we hung up that night.
Uh-huh. It was too late for me to get in the car.
Yeah,
Victor
yeah.
was
Because
already
again,
asleep.
you called at 11:30 at night, so
Yeah.
I did not expect you to jump in the car and drive,
Mhm.
back home.
Mhm.
So, um, the joyous person in me,
Mhm.
in the answered prayer I was praying at the same time. I was so joyous in that
Mhm.
state. Okay, here's the horrible part. It's
What?
actually quite funny.
What?
I texted my boss at the end of that conversation,
Oh no.
and at that point, it's probably 12:30, almost 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Hey, bro," I was like, "Hey, boss,
Uh-huh.
my wife called me. We're working it out. She's
Uh-huh.
coming back home. Um,
I'm not
I
coming.
ain't coming to work tomorrow."
Oh my goodness.
and and I thank God because I had good rapport with my boss,
Mhm.
and he, he replied that night too.
Oh,
He's like,
wow.
he was like, "Hey, no problem, Mario. I understand. You know, take care of your business.
Mhm.
You know, you got plenty of vacation time, you know, and all
Mhm.
that. Don't worry
Mhm.
about it.
Yeah.
Take a vacation day, you know, take care of your business. I was like,
Yeah.
good. All right, good.
Yeah.
But again, here I am farting around till probably 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Till then, I was just literally exhausted. You know, I put on some worship music. I was praying. I had
Mhm.
tears of joy this time around. It wasn't tears
Wow.
of sorrow or
Yeah.
hurt. I'm just like, thank you, God. Thank you, God.
Mhm.
You know, I am crying tears of joy. I'm like, oh my goodness. So after I get done with that little portion of a couple hours of doing that, I'm exhausted, tired.
Mhm.
I go to bed.
Mhm.
I wake up and I make myself some coffee, some breakfast. You know, I remember you texted me, telling me you're going to be home at such and such time, you're
Yeah.
leaving,
Yeah.
and I wait. And so if we fast forward this, you're pulling in the drive.
Uh-huh.
I see you pulling in the drive.
Mhm.
So I'm waiting at the door. I open up the door
Mhm.
and I notice something different. You
Mm.
got out of the car real quick. And then
Yeah.
you were like, you didn't run, but it was a pretty fast pace in which you came from out of the driver's side,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
all the way to the front door.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, we kissed and hugged. You know, you came inside the door. And you're like, I love you, I love you. And we had our little moment, you know, of
Mhm.
reconciliation and
Mhm.
love. You know, I
Mhm.
love you, I miss you, and everything. And then you said the words, and I'll never forget.
Mhm.
There's something I need to tell you.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. And then the second set of words came out. Please don't be mad.
Yeah. I was terrified
Yes,
that
because in
you were
that moment
gonna
of a joyous
turn
state,
into.
there's
Yeah.
still this fearfulness
Uh-huh.
in the back of your
Yep.
mind that the enemy's trying to
Mhm.
conjure up
Mhm.
one more time.
Yeah. It's not.
He's all of it was fake.
Yeah.
He lied to you on
Yeah.
the phone. Nothing really happened,
Yep.
and he's got to blow up on you because you're
Mhm.
about to do what? What are you about to reveal?
That Victor got bit by a dog and had to have 12 stitches.
Mm.
Mhm.
So you let me know what happened,
Mhm.
and I knew in that moment. The whole time you're like, the moment you told me, please don't be mad.
Mhm.
The Holy Spirit hit me really hard.
Wow.
Okay.
Mhm.
And he said to me very specifically,
Mhm.
stay humble, stay humble, stay humble.
Yeah.
Don't lose it.
Wow.
So I was like, okay.
Mhm.
And what did I do when you told me?
You reacted very calmly, and I remember being shooketh to my very core because I was like, he's not gonna explode.
Yeah.
He's not gonna be angry.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, my
Mm.
husband really is changed.
Yeah.
Because I was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because right
Because
after
that's
that,
your baby boy as much as mine.
because right after that humble portion of, you know, be humble, be humble, be humble,
Mm-hmm.
God was telling me, how are you supposed to love your wife? How are you supposed to love your wife?
Mm-hmm.
Love is patient
Mm-hmm.
and love is kind.
Yeah.
And that's what kept going through my brain over and over.
Mm-hmm.
Love is patient. Be kind. Be patient, Mario. Be kind. Be patient, Mario. And so you told me,
Yeah.
dog bit him.
Mm-hmm.
He's got 12 stitches, probably going to scar.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kissed you on your forehead and I said, it's going to be okay. You're home. Victor's home.
Mm-hmm.
We're all safe.
Yeah.
And I went and got him out of the car. I started crying. Couldn't help it, you know, because I saw
It
12 stitches.
it was
It,
a gnarly.
it looked gruesome.
It was pretty gruesome.
You
Yeah.
know, and you know, for all intents and purposes, Victor's 10 years old today. Well,
Mm-hmm.
not his birthday's not today, but as of today, he's 10 years old
Mm-hmm.
and he still has that scar.
Yeah.
So we have between us, because of the conflict that took place in our darkest
Mm-hmm.
hour,
Mm-hmm.
okay, in which the enemy was working in your childhood, he worked in my childhood,
Mm-hmm.
and it got unleashed in the most inopportune season of our marriage, which
Yeah.
was early on.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he tried to destroy us.
Oh yeah. Obliterate.
He tried to just completely annihilate
Mm-hmm.
and threw that wedge in, and he slammed it hard in between us.
Yep.
And it almost worked.
Yeah.
Almost, devil.
Right. Almost.
But because we were rooted in God,
Mm-hmm.
okay, the door
Yeah.
was never shut for God to whisper to us.
Right.
Okay.
Right. We might have been listening to the enemy but we were also listening to God,
Mm-hmm.
and we knew that we needed to obey God if this was ever going to work,
Yes.
and we did.
Mm-hmm. So we, myself, my wife,
Hmm.
to this day, we will never forget that conflict.
Nope.
We saw how the enemy worked,
Hmm.
and we saw how God got the glory.
Yeah.
But we still have a physical reminder
Yep.
of the choices we made.
Yeah.
So, it's simply put, for every choice you have,
Mhm.
there is a consequence.
And a stark reminder that if we don't get it right, our
Ooh.
son pays for it.
Oh, yes, he did. He paid the price.
Yes.
Because if you would have not reacted out of fear, if
Yep.
I would have treated you and loved you and not talked to you the way I did,
Hmm.
this would have took place.
Yeah. And it's a humble reminder every day of um to follow God's leading and to follow God's path in our
Mhm.
marriage so that Victor doesn't pay the price.
Right. And I'll just confess here.
Hmm.
The other day, Victor, came home from school,
Hmm.
and he was tired, and he just threw his backpack down. You went to the kitchen, and he just kind of crawled up underneath my arm. But what's the first thing I saw? I saw the scar.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I got a little teary-eyed because I remembered the pain, and I remembered what the enemy tried to do.
Hmm.
And not only did he almost take our marriage out, my son almost got taken out by a dog.
That's true.
But God still had his working hand in all of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And he poured out his grace on you
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
worked in you over the 3.5 days.
Yes.
And he poured his grace out on me, and he did what he had to do within my side of it.
Hmm.
So, simply put, you became surrendered to the process.
Yep.
I became surrendered to the process.
Yeah.
And the best outcome was God getting the glory, and his holy covenant is still intact to this day.
Yes.
And here we are, 15 years now,
Hmm.
working, killing it for God,
Yes.
and doing what we're supposed to be doing, pushing his kingdom forward.
Yeah.
And I thank God that we're here.
It's a
you know?
miracle.
Yes, it is. It's hard work.
Hmm.
It's hard work. So, as simply put, this whole topic is conflict. It's going to happen.
Yep.
Here's what I want to remind everybody. Healthy conflict builds your communication skills. It should build intimacy,
Hmm.
and it will build trust
Yeah.
when you do it the right way. Because again, when you have a Christ-centered relationship,
Hmm.
you don't get a choice on what it looks like, what it sounds like, or how it reacts, because God is very specific.
Hmm.
And so at that point, you have a choice. Either you're going to make the right choices and treat your significant other, your spouse, the way you should,
Yeah.
or you're going to allow the enemy to drive the wedge.
Yeah. And I would say clearly, but all of those things did increase since that time. We're not those same people
Oh, no.
that we were back then.
Hmm.
And we have grown exponentially
Yep.
and become deeper in love with one another, deeper in communication with one another, deeper in trust with one another. And we know how to talk to one another now.
Yes.
So God really has done a good work and has finished. Well, we haven't arrived, but he is in the process of, continuing our marriage story.
Right. I thank God for counseling, because we got our butts into counseling shortly thereafter.
Very like the week after, actually.
So necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are some practical things that people can do throughout their marriage, throughout their relationship,
Mm-hmm.
in order for healthy conflict to take place, so that ugly conflict doesn't make a disastrous moment?
Mm.
And so here's what I came up with.
Okay.
Okay. First and foremost, how you talk to your spouse matters.
Yes.
And what I mean by this, instead of complaining all the time,
Mm-hmm.
how about you present it in the form of request?
For example.
Take for instance, my love language is touch.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's one of the things how I receive love from you.
Mhm.
Okay, I love when you touch me, when you caress me, when you rub my arm,
Mhm.
when you rub your fingers through my hair,
Yep.
just the physical aspect of touch. I love it. But there's a healthy way for me to tell you, you know, instead of, my love tank is empty. Why don't you do something about it? Or, "Why- it's been 5 days since you last touched me in any way whatsoever. I don't feel loved."
Mhm.
You're not going to receive it that well,
Right.
right? Instead, how about hey, baby, I could really appreciate a little bit of extra lovin's tonight.
Yeah.
And you'd be like,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, I can do that." You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
and so that's one thing that you can do. Okay.
Mhm.
Another thing that you can really do is to share what you feel.
Yeah.
Like take for instance what I just said early on in this conversation. Okay,
Mhm.
if instead of me going, why won't you talk to me? Why are you shutting down?
Mhm.
Why don't you say anything?
Yeah.
How about change
Mhm.
your whole conversation again? How you receive communication matters.
Mhm.
And if I just would have said, "Sweetie, I'm really feeling isolated right now in this moment. I
Yeah.
don't feel like we're on a team.
Right.
I don't feel very loved right now in this moment."
Mhm.
That would have penetrated straight to your heart, and I'm sure you would have reacted so much better.
Yeah. For sure. Um and as far as communication goes and communicating how you feel, it is best to say I feel X when you do Y. Don't say you make me feel blank.
Oh yeah.
That's very accusatory,
Yep.
and we don't want to accuse our partners of anything because at the end of the day, they have our best interest at heart. We want to just solve the problem.
Yeah. Tell them what you
So
feel.
I feel isolated when you don't talk to me,
Right.
or I feel scared when you raise your voice at me.
Mm-hmm.
So put it on your feelings, not what the other person is doing to make you feel that way.
Right.
Because the other person can't make you feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's not possible. But just clarifying the way that you can talk.
Right. And lastly, we want to add is perspective thinking,
Mhm.
or as some put it, empathy.
Yeah.
Put yourselves in their shoes in the
Mhm.
moment. When you start to looking at things, or I like to put it, one of the key uh, tools that we received in our first portion of counseling is a simple statement. Why is my spouse reacting this way?
Mhm.
And what can I do to help change that?
Right.
That was a game changer for me, by the way. It really
Mhm.
was.
Mhm.
Because then at that point, that puts me in a place of vulnerability and have a very empathetic
Mhm.
uh, mindset. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought I presented this to her, and how I communicated, how I said it, the tone. I thought I said it perfectly,
Right.
but I got the scowl.
Mm.
I got the
The tone.
hands crossed. I
Mhm.
got the tone of your voice.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, okay. And so when I use that tool, that tells me that didn't penetrate her heart, that went straight to the mind, or it went over her head, or
Mhm.
whatever the case was, it did not penetrate the heart. So therefore, why is my spouse reacting this way? And what can I do to help change that?
Yeah.
And that will sincerely put you in a place of humbleness
Yeah.
so that you can proceed forward
Yeah.
in how you love your spouse in that moment.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Absolutely.
well, we got it out.
Yes, we did. Praise God.
Praise you, Jesus. Anything else to add to this today? Okay.
No.
Well, we hope this helps you in some regards so that, uh, if anyone's out there that's married and you're having these moments to where someone's being domineering, someone's shutting down,
Mhm.
you know, just remember this. Why is my spouse reacting this way? And what can I do to help change that?
Mhm.
And if you have Christ at the center, he's going to work a miracle because that's what he
Yes.
does.
Yes.
That's what he does. And when you allow him, when you're surrendered in
Oh,
the
The
process,
key word
okay?
there is allow.
Yeah. Oh, wow. It's your choice.
Yeah.
But again, just like we had, for every choice, there's a consequence. Our
Yeah.
consequence ended up in a physical way that we will always be remembered
Yep.
in the form of 12 stitches.
Yes.
We pray and hope that that doesn't happen to you and
Mm-hmm.
that you surrender much more quickly in the
Yep.
process before something happens in a physical way that you are forever remembered.
Yep.
So we want to thank you for listening in. Love you guys. We appreciate you. So until the next time, God loves you. We love you. And you have a blessed day.
Leading families to